It's my great honor and pleasure to be here with Yossi Klein Halevi, who is a renowned author, written many books, which you should definitely check out. In particular, one coming out later this year, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbors, coming out in May, right? And in addition to being a writer, Yossi Klein Halevi is a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute here in Yerushalayim, here in Israel. So I really just want to ask you two questions.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you. The first question I want to ask you is, well, first I would describe you as, and you've described yourself as a centrist, really. And I think at least in American Jewish life, we see a polarization towards sort of a far left and a far right, and sort of a dwindling of this middle, which cares much about security and sovereignty, but also about peace. And so I think you occupy a unique intellectual and activist space. So the first thing I want to ask you about this is, what makes you pessimistic about a peace process in terms of us getting to a place where all people are honored and dignified, where there really is a peace solution that can work? What are your main sources of pessimism?
Well, I think that one of the main sources of pessimism is how deeply pessimistic both sides are, and how deep the mistrust is on both sides. And one might say that each side has earned that mistrust. I'll speak as an Israeli, and I'll let Palestinians speak for themselves. For me, what makes me pessimistic is when I look at the Palestinian media, and I see that every day, it doesn't matter if it's a newspaper of the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas, or if it's Hamas, Jihad Islami, the message is that Israel is not legitimate. The Jews are an invented people. We don't have roots here. We're not indigenous to this land. We're thieves. And that's a message that one generation after another of Palestinians have been raised on. And so how do you make peace with a neighbor who's not legitimate? Now, on our side, for many years, the pretty standard response to Palestinian nationalism was similar. You're not a real people. You've invented your identity, which of course is true. The Palestinians didn't invent their identity, but so did we. Every people invents its identity. That's the definition of a people. At some point, a group of people become a people. And so it doesn't matter when that process happens. Today, I think that a majority of Israelis, to one extent or another, recognize that there's a Palestinian people, accept the legitimacy of Palestinian self-definition. And that may not be what our current government expresses, but I think that if there were a real chance for a deal, a majority of Israelis would go for it. But the pessimism is to some extent justified and to some extent self-fulfilling.
Okay. Yeah, very well said. So on the side of optimism, what makes you optimistic that we will soon or at some point reach shalom?
Well, if you look at what's happening in the region, there's an extraordinary historic transformation going on, and that is that Arab Sunni nations are looking toward Israel in effect to defend them against an imperial Iran. Iran is taking over one Arab country after another. Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, of course, Yemen. And the goal of Iran is to control the Middle East.
This is supposed to be the optimism.
And this is what passes for Israeli optimism.
Okay.
And so the circumstances of the strategic circumstances in the Middle East, this shared threat of Iran, which Israel and the Arab world have in common, is bringing us together for the first time. And peace in the Middle East is not necessarily going to happen in a sentimental Western way. It's going to happen in a hard way. Look at the Middle East. One country after another is disintegrating. This is a hard place. And so if we have a convergence of strategic interests, my hope is that what begins as a security alliance will eventually become a political relationship, which could have implications for the Palestinian issue as well.
Which means to say that it's not going to be in direct engagements, but sort of indirect,
Regional
coalitions.
Yeah, we used to think in Israel that the key for Israel making peace with the region is the Palestinians. You have to solve the Palestinian problem, and then we're going to solve the region.
Yeah.
I think we're shifting back to a Sadat model. When Egypt's president came here in 1977 and we made a bilateral peace.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to, I hope, that's what's going to happen with part of the region at least.
Yeah.
But it will have to include in some way the Palestinian issue.
If you look at systems theories in general as we move towards eras of decentralization and how every bit of a puzzle affects everything else, and to think that we can isolate these two people and resolve it in isolation from the rest of the region and world, it doesn't make much sense. So, yeah.
And I'll tell you, I also, I've written this book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, and it'll be out in May, but I've shown the manuscript to a few Palestinian friends, and I've started getting responses.
Right.
Not easy responses.
Right.
What I do in the book is I explain who the Jews are and why we came home, why I came home. What do we mean when we say we came home to this place? What does it mean that we kept faith with this place for 2,000 years? It's a crazy story. No people ever did that before. And then come back. It's absolutely irrational. And yet that's the essence of who we are. And so I've written this book to try to explain to my Palestinian neighbors and to anyone else who's interested about who we are, what our story is. And I'm starting to get responses. That gives me hope. That maybe we've reached the point where people are so sick of this conflict that we're ready to start talking and listening, not at least at this point on the leadership level, on a person-to-person level. And so I'm a writer. I write, that's what writers do. So I wrote this book, and I'm putting it out there. We're going to translate it into Arabic, put it online for free downloading, only for Arabic speakers. English speakers have to buy the book. So that's the...
as you know, things can spread like wildfire, especially in the Arab world. So my last question for you then is the pessimism and the optimism, which in your Jewish gut, in your human gut, sort of outweighs the other?
Well, it's really interesting because I think that we've earned both our optimism and pessimism by our historical experience. You can read Jewish history and come to a very pessimistic conclusion about human nature. You can read Jewish history and come to a very optimistic nature about
20th century history, maybe.
about the evolution of history,
that's true.
about the capacity of the miraculous to be fulfilled in mundane history. That's really our story. It's the story of Israel. And so I'm definitely a long-term optimist, maybe not so much in the short term.
Very good. Keep up the wonderful work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shmuly.
If you haven't already, go to Amazon to check out the wonderful books Yossi Klein Halevi has read, and rare nuance and balanced perspectives. Very insightful. Thank you so much.